MSNBC's back for this week.
Penny wears you down. I see how Josh Baker instantly providing powerful relief to muscles and joints. Icy High.
And Icy High now has a bold new look with the same powerful relief to help you rise from pain. By using the Spectrum Mobile Savings Calculator, you can easily...
Before we get started, it sounds like someone needs to mute in the background. I hear a TV or something, so hopefully you can mute that. Great. All right. Well, here we go. Welcome to the Professional Athletes Foundation. We're better known as the PAF. Welcome to kind of a new offering that we have, the PAF Lit League, which is our book club. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for reading the book. We have a very special guest here today. And, you know, this guy's been around a little bit, and he's got some great stories, and he's done some great work, and he's touched some of the legends in sport. So I just want to welcome George Mumford to the stage today. George is the author of The Mindful Athlete. I think born and reared in Boston, Massachusetts. So if there's anybody else on here from the Northeast, give a little shout out to George. George attended UMass, I believe UMass Amherst, and I think at one point was Dr. J's roommate. For all you younger former players, Dr. J was one of the all-time NBA greats. He was Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan. Well, welcome, George, and we're happy to have you.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to be engaged with you all today. I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have and the opportunity that's here for us to really, just really connect and really talk about what's real.
Yes, I appreciate that. Well, to the players on the call, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. So, in the chat, just can you let me know how you're feeling on a scale from 1 to 10? And as you're loading that into the chat, I'll just say that, in some of our research, we've learned that reading is a nice way to balance out your mental health, and certainly reading books and getting together with others to talk about books is also important for maintaining mental health. It's like we've got one question in the chat. Someone's saying, happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Lit League. Okay. This person, Spencer says he's a 10. He's feeling really great. So that's good. That's good to know. I'm feeling great too. And I think I can share a little bit about how I try and balance out my mental health on a daily basis. I do try and work out. I certainly don't lift the heavy stuff like I used to, but I do try and add a lot of variety to what I consider exercise for myself. I walk. I get on the elliptical. I thought I was going to be a jogger maybe about 11 weeks ago, but after maybe my third run, those knees were not having that. So I'm officially not a runner anymore. I can do some light jogging on a treadmill, but running on the street, that will never happen for me again. But certainly the walking seems to be the most enjoyable thing. It really gives you a chance to kind of open up your mind and kind of look out and look up and, see what's going on and get some fresh air. See a couple guys, a 9, feeling good, feel wonderful, a 10, got an 8, we got a 7. So that's good. So I think we're all doing okay. Does anyone have any questions right out of the gate for George? We do really want to focus on the book today, The Mindful Athlete. What did some of you think? And do you have any questions out there? But please load them into the chat. I'm going to try and moderate from the chat today. But let me ask George a question while we're getting started. But George, what inspired you to write this book? I know you had spent some time with Phil Jackson, kind of, working in his system and helping his players kind of reach their full potential, physically, emotionally, and mentally. So tell me how you got to that point, and then really what inspired you to write this book.
Well, it's interesting because I've been trying to write a book for about 20 years at that time. And some of my teachers and friends were saying, man, you have to write a book. And, you know, if you keep messing around, by the time you write, my friend Jack Cornfield, he said to me, he said, by the time you write a book, people won't know who Kobe and MJ are. So he just kept, and so I just didn't really have the motivation. And then I had a friend, I had the motivation, I just couldn't get it done. And I had this friend of mine, Nancy, who worked for Parallel Express, which is a nonprofit publishing house owned, you know, that's owned by the Thich Nhat Hanh Foundation. You know, he's in the mindfulness space. He's one of the pioneers around bringing mindfulness, you know, and his phenomenal book, The Miracle of Mindfulness. And so she said, well, you know, I want you to write a book on mindfulness in athletics. And we talked about it. And then time went by, and then John Kabat-Zinn, who was a friend, and I worked with him at the stress reduction clinic at the medical center in the 90s. We had a prison project and we had an inner city clinic. He was doing there was something that 60 Minutes was doing something on mindfulness. So they invited about 20 of us, including John, to participate in a meditation retreat and interviews with you know, Anderson Cooper, and we were there and we were talking and asking questions. And one of the things that Anderson asked us is, well, how do you stop companies, because a lot of corporations are using mindfulness, how do you stop companies from exploiting that? And so he asked a question. I knew about 8 of us on the panel, and I knew the answer, but I couldn't really say it in a soundbite. And it was at that moment I realized that I have a view of mindfulness, a view of mindfulness, because they weren't, they were just, you know, most people were talking about mindfulness and just in everyday life, where I was focused on mindfulness and performance. That's why the name of my book is The Mindful Athlete: Secrets to Pure Performance. And at that point, I realized that my book was needed, that I needed to have, I had a view of mindfulness, I had a view of performing that was different than the other folks on there that covered things like integrity, covered the fact like there's mindfulness, but then there's right mindfulness, which has to do with it being focused on, you know, goodwill and well-being, not focused on selfish interest. Because when I worked in the prison, especially where I come from around Boston, most of the cats, you've seen the movie The Town. And the town, you know, it's Charlestown.
What's up, guys?
Them dudes know how to rob banks. And to rob banks, you gotta use effort. You gotta be mindful, and you get concentrated. But it's not right effort, right concentration, right mindfulness. And so I wanted to give to share my version of mindfulness that was more holistic and more. It was more like, well, if I were to say it, mindfulness in the process that I engage in a book is not to dominate, but to co-create.
So when you're,
so does that make sense? So when I did that, then I made the decision I was going to write the book. And so here's what happened. So I was up in San Francisco, and I was going to meet my friend who worked for the publishing house. I was going to meet her for lunch. And so on that Sunday, I decided I'm going to write the book. And then I went to lunch. And then I met her, and the editor for Parallel Express was there, and they offered me a book deal right on the spot. And that's how I got to do it. It was like when I saw how it could help others, I couldn't really do it just for me, because there's a lot of books out there. But once I started connecting to the fact that this is going to help people, and I want to help people, then that's how the book came about. So I know that's a long story, but that's the story. Is I've been trying to write a book, and once I stopped trying to write a book, it wrote itself.
So in just listening to your talk, you know, you kind of led me to a question. So in your version of mindfulness, you talked about a holistic approach. So, you know, some of the guys on the line, and, you know, some of us have, you know, sons and daughters who compete, you know, in athletics. So how does the holistic approach, more than just kind of that laser focused performance type of mindfulness, how does the holistic approach kind of lift you to a higher level?
Yeah, so we talk about like the threefold training. So one thing is, so everybody gets that mindfulness is, you know, it's it's like mental discipline. It's about, you know, getting your mind focused and that sort of thing. But your character, you know, what we call integrity and morality, is your mind. You have to be in integrity. That means that what you do is helpful, not unhelpful. So even though there's the mental training, then it has to be guided by wisdom, or understanding how the universe works, understanding how we work, and an alignment. So our goal isn't, you know, we're not being driven by, you know, desire or fear. We're being sort of committed to inspiring generosity, just from a holistic, in terms of goodwill. We want to spread goodwill. We want to have good intentions. We want to have these mind states that are wholesome. So if my mind is full of greed, or if I'm coming from survival mode, it's going to be the animal kingdom. It's going to be the animal realm. But if I can come from, you know, love mode, if I see that there's a lawfulness in the universe, whether we want to call it God or whatever, and that the way things work, if I align myself with the way things work, then I'll be fine. So if I know that with integrity, if I speak if I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, there's not going to be any power in my words. And that's going to affect my ability to perform. So for instance, where I teach sometimes is in Cambridge, Mass. It's in the city. And when I talk to people, I say there's a store 24 on the corner. If you go and rob that store 24, and then you come in here and you try to meditate, every time you hear a police siren or something, how much cool you going to have? And for some of us, if we really listen to our hearts, when we do wrong or we do somebody dirty, if we be still and know, it doesn't feel right. So I'm talking about that conscience that we have, or the idea of, it's not like being Pollyanna. It's about what's workable. So if you have integrity, you're going to have power. You're going to have access to power. And so if you're not doing things that are unhelpful, then it's easier to relax, and it's easier to be present for your life. But there has to be some wisdom, some information, some understanding of what that is, and how to live in alignment with how things work. So you don't have to believe in gravity, but if you jump up, you will come down. So it's about that. It's about understanding the lawfulness and how we work as human beings. When I first got in here, I was a dope fiend and I had chronic pain. And I thought my mind and body were two separate things. I didn't realize that my mind and body are something that are connected, and that how I direct attention, how I see things, is going to impact how much I enhance my God-given gifts, or my masterpiece, or my Christ consciousness, whatever you want to call it. That there's something that's here, that how I relate to my experience and relate to others is going to give me more access to it. Does that make any sense? So that's why I'm saying holistically, you got to look at like the me and the we. I work with teams. So the me, we're as strong as the weak is me, but the me and the we have to be developed. And it's that dynamic tension of being selfish and being selfless. And so when I talk about mindfulness, I'm talking about a way of relating to ourselves in the world in a way where it's better together, and we understand, we get beyond this illusion of separateness and realize I and the other are one.
Yeah. To whoever's on the phone, 801-420, you're going to have to mute your phone. We've got a little feedback from you, okay? But George, so this brings me to another point. Earlier this month, or, you know, in the preparation for Kobe Bryant's Hall of Fame induction, he talked about how, you know, you just let him be. How do you take someone so talented in so many different areas and kind of, I don't want to say harness it, but just let it exist, you know, at its highest level? You know, how did you help Kobe? What was that experience like?
Yeah, well, it was amazing. So we did a post, a social post, and, you know, they had the Hall of Fame, so HOF, Hall of Fame. And so I said, you need the HOF to get to the HOF. So my HOF is hope, optimism, and faith. So with the hope, optimism, and faith, my idea was, you know, I see Kobe as a masterpiece, and my job was to help him chip away to let that masterpiece express itself. And so you have to have hope, you have to have optimism, you have to have faith. And then it's just a matter of be still and know. Me just being able to see where he was and understand where he's going, and then understand how do we get rid of the noise and clutter so you can just be yourself. So in that sense, when I first started working with Kobe, it was during a game, before a game. And at that time, Kobe was this young, kind of like Mustang, just ready to go out there. And every time he scored a basket, it was like he was trying to score 35 points. And so, and in the warm up, I said, Kobe, the best way to score is not to try to score. And he had 16 points in the first quarter. Now, most people don't realize that's a lot of points for any quarter, but he had 16 points by non-doing, by being. And so if you read the quote, he's talked about, I teach him how to be. So it's really more about relating to experience, like, just seeing things as things are and relating to it in a way where it empowers you to be yourself, where you let those latent abilities express themselves. So there's training, like a lot of us on here, you have the discipline, there's learning, there's practicing, and then there's performance or experience. And so it's really about understanding we have these gifts, we have this talent that we have access to if we're willing to develop it. And if we have somebody help us understand how to develop it. So my job is not to make him into MJ or make him do anything else. My job is like Michelangelo, the art, people say, how do you create these masterpieces out of these blocks of marble? And he said, all I do is chip away to get to the masterpiece that's already there. So I'm not trying to fix anybody. My job is to help them find themselves, help them use the immediacy of experience to say, okay, how do I relate to this situation in a way? And how do I train and develop myself so I can be fully present and fully self-expressive? That makes any sense.
It does. So for us, post-competitive athletes, I would assume we all kind of have a shell of things, around us that kind of keep us from just being. What's some advice for how to kind of chip away at what's holding us back now as post-competitive athletes in our everyday lives?
Yes. So this is really important. And so I'm an OG myself. I mean, I had to, I didn't get clean until I was 32 and a half or whatever. And then I had to, just reinvent myself. So I think it's about seeing ourselves in different ways and understanding that everything that we've been through, all the training we've had, we have some transferable skills that we can bring into our life, but it really comes down to just asking the question, am I being myself? I have this unique ability, and just be still and know, and how can I not only be myself, but how can I be productive? And so it's being willing to be honest, to take that inner journey. It's an inside job. How can I develop my God-given abilities that I have, not just physical, mental, emotional, spiritual? How can I access those? And then once I access them by the development and getting clear about, like heart searching, this, well, what I call deep listening, if you only had 6 months to live, what would you be doing? Something like that. I'm talking about like the deep question, like, what's my job? With the big J, I'm here. I'm unique. I have a unique talent. I have a certain pace that nature intended for me. I have to go inside and understand myself and understand, what does my heart say? What do I really want to do? And just really, have the courage to just really, like Shakespeare said, to thine own self be true. But then in the Bible, it talks about know the truth and the truth shall make you free. So it's like being able, I talk about it on my YouTube podcast, to embrace whatever's coming up and generate the hope, the optimism, and the faith, and then make decisions that's based on how can I be a contributing member of this family or contributing member of this society, but I have to be selfish, to be selfless. I have to be clear about who I am and understanding the thoughts I entertain, the feelings I entertain, the behaviors I get into. They're creating a destiny, right? They're expressing our values. And so it's really more about, like me, I just have to do that soul searching, I mean, Malcolm X did it when he was in prison. Nelson Mandela was able to do it. Even, dare I say, Hitler wrote Mein Kampf when he was in prison. That's why I said there's right mindfulness and there's wrong mindfulness. And so we all have these capacities of what I talk about, the two wolves, you know, the fear wolf and the love wolf. And whichever wolf you feed is the one that grows. So I'm talking about feeding the love wolf and realizing that as long as we're breathing, there's more right with us than what's wrong with us. And we don't stop growing and learning until we die. We have to become learners, seekers. And then if we do that and we pay attention and we ask for help, we're able to start to access. That's why I wrote the book. The book is a kind of a foundation for that. You know, you got to know yourself. You got to get clear about what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, but even more so, what does my heart tell me that I need to be doing or who I need to be being, instead of letting the environment tell us it's an inside job. We get to choose who we are being. If we can create space between stimulus and response, and in that space, we have our core values and our goals, and then we achieve that. So everybody's on this call. I mean, we've developed enough discipline to be able to do this. It's just that we may not be clear about, or we may not have the understanding or the insight of how to, you know, get rid of these hideouts or this encrusted shell. How do we break out of the shell in a way where we can be ourselves and be at ease, be at peace? But we got to be the self-honesty and the ability to accept things as they are, and in spite of embracing it and then generating hope and relating to it in a way that empowers us, that allows us to learn what we need to learn and to grow in the way we need to grow.
Yeah. So that leads me to another question. So you talk a lot about faith in this holistic approach, you know, faith as one of these pillars for this holistic mindfulness. Can you do it without faith? Can you do it without a focus on, you know, how religion and how God makes us feel?
Yeah, well, when I go back to what I learned about getting clean and sober, because my best thing couldn't keep me from getting high or getting drunk, right? I realized that my basic dilemma was a lack of power, but there is one that has all power. May you find that power now. And so there's an energy font in the universe. It could be, we can call it God, but it's just, it's like the plug in a wall. You can plug into that and you have access to power. So it's not about belief, because belief is holding on. Faith is letting go. According to Alan Watts, that's what he says. So it's really more about understanding that there's a lawfulness in the universe. This is what Albert Einstein said. He said the main question we have to answer is this a friendly or unfriendly universe? And if it's a friendly universe, I won't go into the other, then we will use all our resources to align ourselves with how things work. There's a lawfulness. And if we align ourselves with how things work, or we align ourselves with divinity, okay, we don't have to believe in God, but if we think God is love, God is, continual forgiveness, whatever, we can align ourselves with that energy. We don't have to really kind of believe and go, have that thing. It's just really about being that, having that Christ consciousness, that Buddha nature, that divine spark, is connecting to that energy, which is about what I talked about: love, compassion, goodwill, getting beyond the illusion of separateness. I and the other are one. And it's not Pollyanna-ish. I'm not saying you don't fight and you don't protect yourself. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there's a way of relating to experience in a way and connecting to higher power. That's why I call it the superpowers in my book. Mindfulness, concentration, diligence, insight, faith, that those things, you got to have faith to make the effort. Mm-hmm. You got to believe that there's a way forward. We live in the future we see. So when we don't see much of a future, then why would we get up and get busy? We're going to just sit there and wait for something to happen. But if we see a future that we want to live into, and we realize we can co-create, we don't have to dominate, then we get busy that way. So if we live into the future we see, so I'll give you an example. So if I said to everybody on this call, there's a room or building next door to you. If you go in that building, they're going to give you a root canal. Well, you're going to procrastinate. You ain't looking forward to going there. It's just not happening. Mm-hmm. But if I say whatever like say you want to win the lottery or you want something that you really want, like let's just say the lottery. If I say you got a winning lottery ticket over there, you might get over there without even touching the ground. So what's the difference? The difference is that's something that I can live into, that I'm excited about, versus looking at things in a way like the glass is either half empty, half full. Both are right. Half empty puts you in survival mode, puts you in, trying to survive and fit in. The other one, seeing the glass is half full, that means that there's abundance and there's enough for everybody and there's enough for me. I just have to develop myself and then go for it in a way that's helpful. Does that make sense?
It does. Thanks for that, George. I appreciate that. So we have a question in the chat. So this is directly for you, George. Are you of the opinion that this is a malevolent universe? How do we navigate in the event that it is? I believe it is, given to entropy or decay.
So I have a couple of answers to that. First of all, entropy is kind of a physical thing. Centropy is where I look at myself. I have a mind, body, heart, and soul. So the physical entropy, yeah, my body's going to run down and all of that stuff. But the centropy, the thoughts that I entertain, the way I look at things can access me to an energy fund or to that power source that goes beyond the physical realm. And so that's we look at things physical, but it's physical, then it's metaphysical or non-physical. And what I'm saying is we have access to that depending on how we direct attention, depending on what thoughts we entertain, whatever we hold in mind. Because when I say co-create, whatever we hold in mind, that's what we create. That's what manifests. As a man thinketh, so is he or she, whatever. And so when you think about, you can look at it as a malevolent universe, and that's what happens when you're in fight, flight, or freeze. When the fear is taken over, when you see the glass is half empty, you can see it that way. Then that's what it is. But it's also possible for you to look at it in a way where the glass is half full, and you're in the love, you're in that growth mindset where it's like, okay, you have an issue or something comes up, you learn from it, and then you keep it moving. And so it's a choice. That's what I'm saying. So it's no, because what's out there is a reflection of what's in here. So if you have malevolence in yourself, or if I have on my malevolent glasses, that's what I'm going to see. But if I have on the opposite, the love glasses or the openness, or this is a friendly universe to the degree that I can align myself with how things work, then both are right. So that's a choice. It's not like the universe out there is malevolent. Is it dangerous? Yes, but if you know how the lawfulness is, then you align yourself with that. It's like if you don't want to get wet and it's raining, don't go outside.
Yeah.
But if you say it doesn't matter, you go out, then that's different. But it's an excellent question because it's an internal thing. Everybody has to figure that out for themselves. That's what makes it so challenging. But at the same time, you can choose to connect the power, or you can choose to act like it doesn't exist.
That was a great question, and thank you, Spencer, for that. So building on that, George. So, the entropy. What do you do? Do you just, do you accept it and not accept it in the sense that, oh, this is how I feel now. This is how I'm going to have to go through life. But is it more about just accepting it in the sense that, this is me, and, maybe I can love my sore knee and I can still, achieve what I need to achieve.
So it's really more about how do I relate to things in a way that empowers me, a dynamic way. So with me, I hurt my ankle. That ended my career in college, and I thought it was, I didn't know who I was or whatever. Now I look back on it, that was one of the best things that happened to me. And so it's my interpretation. So 90% of long-term happiness is predicated on how the nervous system and the brain interprets our experience. Not 10%, but 90%. So it's like, okay, so I had the same situation as you, Andre. I used to run. I love running. That's why I look at athletes now and say, y'all don't like to run. I don't understand that. I used to love to run. And so, but my knees, I have one knee where I had the torn meniscus, I got bone against bone. So I ran until like 1987. I couldn't run anymore. So I walk and do other things. But it's like, be like water. If your knees don't work, then do something else. This door closes, then another one will open. But that's where the HOF comes in. The hope, the optimism, and the faith. Because if we do that, then we're able to see it affects what they call, it's called the broaden and build theory, where it enhances our ability to see out of the box so that we can see the solution and not be stuck in the tunnel vision. It's just a better way of being. And then there's the whole joy of discovery and all of that stuff. So life is what we make it, and our attitude is very important. But yeah, so it's an inside job, but there's a lot of possibility. Each moment is pregnant with possibility. Just a matter of whether we have a belief that, life sucks and we die, or that things happen. And even if we think about God or a higher power or whatever, we have free will, so we get to choose, but that power source or that access is always with us. In spite of what we do, we can always say, okay, that didn't work. Let me go back to, let me reconnect with power. Won't we reconnect with how things are? And that's it. This is how they are. We get to choose. And then we'd be like water. Okay, something happens, you roll with it, you make it work.
Thanks. Thank you. So we've got one more question on this path from Charles Mincy. Isn't entropy just an expression of a fallen world or universe?
Yes, it's on the physical realm. Things do run down, and yeah, at some point the sun is going to run out of energy.
Yeah. So this isn't just this isn't the Andre Collins and George Mumford hour. So some of you guys, there's no question is a bad question. I mean, we're really blessed today to have a master here with us, and if you practice mindfulness in this way, and it does take work, if you practice mindfulness in this way, you will really see yourself do great things. So we have a master on the line. Are there any questions? Greg Berg, I see you kind of getting excited there a little bit. Do you have a question for George?
Oh, thank you, Andre. I'm part of George's team here, so we're part of George's support. And really just happy that you all taking your time today to join you. So just following along. Thanks, Andre.
Oh, great. Thanks for being here with us. All right. So we do have a couple more questions. This comes in from Drew Davis. For George, what's your favorite book and what is your most recommended thing to have people read?
It's interesting. I get this question a lot, and I was doing a presentation for Lululemon several years back, and they asked me the question, and the Bible came right out without me even thinking about it. So there's a lot of books. Obviously, there's many books. One of the things, just self-disclosure, I'm coming up on 37 years of sobriety in July, and I've averaged over a book a week for that whole time. So there's a ton of books, and I think it depends on where one is and what one is used to. But I think books that are really good for connecting with things besides the Bible, because there's a lot of good stuff in there, is Cybernetics by Maxwell, Maltz. Also, Dr. David Hawkins wrote a book called Power versus Force, where he talks about these energy fields. But there's many, many other books. When I first came out, The Road Less Traveled was a good one that I related to. But right now, I'm reading a ton of books. I read books on quantum physics, on neuroplasticity, all sorts of things. But I think the books, and then there's a book called The Wisdom of Insecurity by Alan Watts. But it depends on where you are. I mean, I can provide a list of books. So there's so many. Obviously, I could talk about Phil's book, 11 Rings, or my book is definitely, but there's a lot of different, my book you can put out there, but there's many different books. It depends what you want to get into. But I think any book that helps us understand who we are and what universe we live in would be helpful. But I think the main book is about understanding the self, understanding who we are on the individual level. So there's many, many books, and I'm just trying to think, because I have all kind of books. I'm reading like 10 at a time sometimes. I'm trying to think of, was a book I was reading. It was The Act of Will, actually, but there's a book called The Paradox of Power by Thurston. That's a powerful book. And Edgar Cayce, any of those books about Edgar Cayce, The Sleeping Prophet, is helpful. Any books that even there's a book called The Power of Awareness by Neville. There's all of those kinds of books. There's a lot of them out there, but any books that talk about even the Four Agreements, any books, The Alchemist, any books that help us understand who we are and who we could be would be helpful. Great. I think, yeah.
Thank you. Next question. How long did you work with Kobe and how did you meet him? And then this person said they've read several of Phil Jackson's books and they'll need to read yours. But how did you meet Kobe and how long did you work with him?
So I have a friend of mine who writes a lot of books that I met when I was working with the Bulls. His name is Roland Lazenby. And so back, I think it was in 1990, it might have been 1998 or somewhere around there, Roland told me about this young man, Kobe Bryant. And so I actually flew to Houston and I met Kobe. Just, Roland introduced me to him and we talked a little bit, and he knew I had worked with MJ and the Bulls. And then as fate would have it, then I started, so I worked with Phil Jackson with the Bulls. So in 98, after we won the sixth championship for the Bulls, my third one with them, Phil took a year off, and then he got hired by the LA Lakers, and then he brought me in there, and then that's when I actually started working with Kobe, and I was part of that process. So I've known Kobe since 1998, but working with him since 2000, and so we became really good friends, and we continued to, talk about this work and talk about what we were able to do and how to make that available for other folks. And so the last time I had a face-to-face with Kobe where I was actually with him was 2015. When I was writing my book, Kobe called me and he invited me to his house and hang out because he wanted to learn how to work with people, the elite of the elite. And so, so I spent a couple of days with him. I actually got to go to a Lakers game. He was still playing for the Lakers. I hadn't planned on going, but that's the only picture you'll see of me and Kobe walking through Staples Center, because everything is, when I work with, elite athletes, everything is private. There's no pictures, no recordings, no stuff like that. But I got to ride on a helicopter with him and spend, hours with him, just me and him, no security, no team stuff. And we just chatted, and there's a side of Kobe that people started learning afterwards, but that's a side that I've seen for a long time. So he's like, it was devastating what happened, but at the same time, he's having such an impact on folks. And so I've known him really well, and we talked about all sorts of things, and he remembered everything I told him. He has a kind of photographic memory. But when you're in competition, you don't really have time to reflect on these things, because I reflect on it now. So from 1996 to 2002, I was working with Phil all those years, and we won 6 championships in 7 years. The only year we didn't have a championship was the year Phil took off. And so you win a championship, then you got to get busy and go, you have a couple of weeks maybe, and then you get focused. But when you're in the moment, you don't have time to focus on how you're doing if you're focused on what you're doing. So it's only in reflection. And then I think with players like MJ and Kobe, after the fact, then you can reflect and you can remember. But in the moment, you're just trying to continue to level up. You're just trying to stay present, be in a moment, and figure out what you have to do to not only perform, but to stay in play and to stay healthy. I mean, there's all these things. Athletes have a tremendous amount of anxiety they have to deal with. I would say almost 24/7. and knowing how to relate to that anxiety in a way where we don't get burnt out, or we don't get overwhelmed and get into despair or low energy. That's important that we acknowledge that and then embrace it and work with it.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to ask Brad's question first, and then I'll go back to Lewis. So can you give us some techniques on how we can take home, some techniques we can take home today on how to create less distraction in life?
Yeah, so one practice is to get away from this myth of multitasking, and just to do the one thing, to do one thing at a time. Like even now, as you're listening and engaging with this, if we can just be in our body and be in the breath, just realize we're sitting and breathing, and we can just tune in and just feel the body breathing in, breathing out. Our eyes could be open, and just giving ourselves, directing our attention, because our thoughts, or it's about directed attention. Or so if I ask you to think about your right palm, where does your energy go? It goes to your right palm, but it doesn't stay there. Then it goes to something else. So we have to train ourselves to be able to be still and know, as it says in the Bible. So if I say, think about my right palm, then once my attention goes there, if I can just drop below the concept of palm and just feel the sensations that are there, and just breathe and just allow that to be there, then you start to see things on a molecular level, what you start to be able to not be distracted. But when we're distracted, we have to train ourselves to be able to say no and to direct our attention where we want to put it. So it's like training a puppy. If you folks have trained puppies, put it on the paper, it comes off. Some point you put it on the paper and then they get it. And that's the same with us. We have the mental muscle. We have to train that. But anytime we could just focus on one thing, anytime we could understand what we hold in mind becomes our reality. So we focus on, and I go back to the philosopher, Dr. Dre, I got my mind on money, money on my mind. You're meditating all the time. It's just a matter of what you're meditating on. To meditate means to contemplate, and to contemplate means to look at repeatedly or to look at closely. So we have to be clear about what belief systems are operating, what glasses we have on, whether we're in survival mode or growth mode. So all of that is helpful, but being able to pray and have some quiet time is, for some of us, maybe it's just sitting quietly, drinking a cup of coffee or tea or whatever, and just being with the tea, being with ourselves, not looking at the news, not looking at our phones, but having these pockets of stillness. And then if you want to learn how to meditate in terms of just being still or praying, you can do that, but you have to have some way of getting out of the fight, flight, and freeze and into the rest and the digest. And so there's a multiplicity of ways of doing it. There's a multiplicity of ways of meditating. All I would say is we have to have time to think and reflect on what we're doing, and reflect on what we did and what it means and what we need to learn. So I would say become a learner and learn from experience. So this is what we do. We have this ability to learn and understand who we are and what we're doing. And if we understand it, then we can level up. We can perform or have a great experience.
Yeah, and you might have answered some of Jay Hu's question, in that last answer. So he's saying, how do you stay disciplined when you feel you're straying away from your goals?
That's important. Just see, because people think that being mindful or mindfulness is just mirror mind. They think being mindfulness that you're not mindful, you're still being mindful. If you know you're straying away from your goal, you're being mindful. And you just have to, then it's a matter of what's the will. Are you going to just say that's happening, or are you going to say, okay, there's something for me to get there. So how do I stay on task? And I just showed you, if when you think about something, you go there. Your attention follows intention. So if you keep directing your mind to what you're doing, at some point it's going to stick, but it's going to wander off. It's going to be thoughts and feelings and all the other stuff coming in. But the discipline is just to let it go and then redirect. It's blue collar work.
It's work though, right? It is work.
Well, it's work if you look at it that way, or if it's joyful, because if you really understand, when you can be still and know, it's sweet. it's sweet when you're in that calm space, when you have that alert, relaxedness, then you're being like, now we go from the mamba to the black cat. You know, that's what they call MJ sometimes. It's like, he's like chilled, just like a cat, he's just right on it. So how can you be in that relaxed and alert mode, especially when you're performing or when you're in, you know, certain situations, like all of us grew up in the hood, you know the vibe, you know, you walk through and you feel something, you know when stuff's going to go down before it goes down if you are tuned in to understanding. So we can use that same ability to seek out opportunities, to seek out places or things, I'd say opportunities. And so instead of looking at what's wrong, let's focus on what's right. Let's focus on what we want, but we get to choose whatever we hold in mind. If I have my mind on money, I got money on my mind. If I have my mind on failure, I got failure on my mind. If I have my mind on being proactive and being compassionate, being kind, but having that strength of character, then I got the strength of character on my mind. So we have to think and understand that what we ingest, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that's in our energy, that's in our aura. So we have to understand, what are we ingesting? What are we listening to? What are we looking at? What are we reading? And we have to understand what that does to us. And if we pay attention, it'll be really clear what are the things we can continue to do that helps us to stay grounded and be on task. So when you're off your goal, it's just because everything's negative feedback. All you have to do is remind yourself what your aim is and then get back on the horse, back on target. And don't beat yourself up and say, okay, when I know better, I'll do better, but let's start over. And when I fall off, I just get back up and keep doing it.
George, this is Bob. I have a question for you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Bob.
I have 5 children, and my youngest boy is Trey. He's 26 years old. I always say, Trey, be and he answers me, he says, leader. What are 2 or 3 or 5 of the best traits of a leader? And kind of as a segue, I mean, people say this person's successful. I mean, were the Buffalo Bills not successful because the place kicker missed a 47-yard field goal and they would have had a ring rather than the Giants having a ring? So what is a leader, and what is your definition of success?
My definition, one definition I like to use is success is a progressive realization of a worthy goal.
Progressive
realization of a worthy goal. That means you're moving in the right direction. You're having these many victories instead of waiting till you get the thing. It's progressive realization of a worthy goal or cause.
A worthy goal, okay.
Yeah. So you decide to be a leader. Decides to be a leader. It's interesting because I'm writing a book on leadership now. You decide to be a leader the moment you decide to be yourself and not what the world or somebody else wants you to be. So leadership is about being yourself. You got to be yourself to be a leader. And one of the things a leader does, a leader has vision, but our leader also is able to express themselves fully. So you got to know who you are so you can be who you are.
Yes.
And you have to understand the universe. You can't just look like, I think about writing this book, leadership book, or any of the programs that I offer, the online course or whatever, even my book. The thing is, yeah, we're here now, but I have to be thinking about moving forward. So even though I'm in the moment, I know if I this moment sets up the next moment. So leaders are learned. They're not born. It's just people making a choice. Oh, I think I hit something by accident. People make a choice of what you want to do and whether you want to learn. And so some leaders, like if you think about Truman, President Truman, I mean, he just had to be up for the moment. I mean, sometimes things dictate. Are you going to, as Vin Diesel says, don't get up if you can't keep up. It's like you relate to the situation and say, okay, like me writing a book, that's a leadership moment when I say, okay, if I do this, I can help people be who they are. And so we keep thinking about leadership, but it's really more about being, and it's about understanding how to find one's voice. So I could name a lot of things, but it's really simple. You got to be a fully integrated self. That means your mind, body, heart, and soul have to be in alignment. You have to make peace with your fear wolf. You have to be integrated. In other words, it has to do with self-knowledge, self-respect, self-integrity, all of those things. And so leadership is really about being yourself, knowing yourself and expressing yourself. So that means to thine own self be true, and then know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. So if you're a leader, you don't deny the truth or you don't manipulate. You just say, okay, this is what it is. And how do I relate to it in a way that empowers us, that allows us to be ourselves and to have it be a stepping stone, not a roadblock? Does that make sense? So there's a lot of books out there, but it's more about being a leader and being able to see clearly what's going on, and then understanding how to motivate other people to join us. So this carrot and stick leadership, or like I have a friend that's not on the call, when his coach tells him to shut up and play football, don't think, that's not leadership.
Well, let Andre know when you're finished your book on leadership, please.
Okay, will do.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob. Sorry, guys, I had some technical difficulties, but I'm back. So hopefully I can't see the chat like I used to. So hopefully all those questions got answered. If your question wasn't answered, do you mind putting it back in the chat for me? But as I'm waiting for more questions, in the meantime, when we have sons and daughters that are competitive athletes, but they wouldn't, George, they might not understand just be, that takes some time to kind of fully realize that concept. So what can we say to them that kind of makes sense? Because I think sometimes as a father, I might be saying too much. I understand just be, but it doesn't always translate. And I feel like I might be hurting him more than I'm helping him.
Yeah. So when I talk about be, I mean just be in the moment, just whatever is there. It's like I know it's in the Bible, it's in a couple of other places. Know what you know, do what you know to do now, and the next step will be given to you. So a lot of it has to do with this idea of being in the moment. What's the win? What's important now? And to get them to say in a moment, yeah, you can think about the future. Yeah, you can think about the past, but the only time you have is now. Let's focus on what's now and what is needed. What do we need to do? And so when I talk about being, I'm talking about you do the best you can do, and you got to let go of the results. That's why I said success is a progressive realization of a worthy goal. And it's about not competing with somebody out there. It's about, okay, competing with your previous best self. So today I got better. That's a winner. So, and I got a little bit better than I was yesterday, but it's focused on I have to have goals, and then understanding that I learn from mistakes. And so when I make a mistake, I need to change it. So when I'm talking about being, I'm talking about, it's really your attitude and the effort you make, your effort and your attitude and your work ethic. It takes effort. So you can control your effort and your attitude, hopefully. And then the results you can't control. But if you do the best you can't do any more than that. So we have to get them into not focusing on how they're doing or the results, but focus on the moment and the process that they're in, and that we learn from mistakes. So when something doesn't go right, you don't say, oh, I'm a bad this or that. No, what do I need to change? What do I need to learn and practice so that I get the result I want? And so we have to get them that. And it's hard challenging I won't say hard. It's almost impossible being a parent, because you don't know when to protect them, and when they understand that it's through the struggle that they get their own strength. And so I was working with this volleyball team in California, and I was talking to the young ladies, and they were just saying to me, listen, dude, we want the softer, easier way. And I finally said, you know something? No struggle, no swag. No struggle, no swag. So I got swag, but I struggle. I earned that. Ain't nobody give you swag. You got to earn that.
Yeah.
And so it's not like being, abusive or putting them through it, but you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You got to push through. You got to find a way to push through with compassion, but you still got to push through, and you still got to deal with it, and you got to figure that out. I mean, all the years I worked with Phil, Teshwin is one of his bench coaches, used to get upset with Phil because Phil wouldn't call a timeout. And Phil would say, I'm not bailing them dudes out. They got to figure that shit out. And we might lose a game or two, but they're going to figure it out. If I keep making it easy for them and bailing them out, no, we look at film, but y'all got to think on your feet. And then you go back to the last possession MJ had, where he just looked at Phil and said, we ain't calling timeout so they can set up. So that's when you start to be able to think on your feet and understand things, and people understand and clearing out spacing and all of that.
Right.
That's what it comes down to, is that's the challenge. But it's not like a process. It's in the moment, episodic, the situation. You can't, we like to say, okay, we do it this way. No, each time you got to see it fresh and new, and you got to trust your gut. When your gut says, yeah, I'm going to let them struggle a little bit, but I need to know, they need to know what the safe word is. Like, hey, I need help, Dad or Mom. But we have to have that talk with them and say and explain to them, yes, I know it's challenging, but you're going to have to develop some stress hardiness, and you're going to have to develop some toughness. And at the same time, it's challenging for me to let you struggle, but I know the struggle is going to make you stronger so you can fly on your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. Stefan Adams, you had your hand up. My apologies. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, that's okay. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Mr. George, on this great information. And I know we're older guys. We've been to the league and all that. And just trying to go back to where you were saying with the kids. I'm a coach here in Georgia, and a high school coach. And just trying to reiterate that being for young athletes, for high school athletes that want to go D1, want to go D2, but not putting in the work. And we understand, it takes work, to go to that level. And he also just to go to the level that we went to, which is a limited amount of us. But how do I guess help infer or help to encourage? I know you're a spiritual man, because everything you've been saying is based on the word of God, what I understand. Mm-hmm. And so how do we mend that together? How do we bring the being together with work in the mm-hmm. moment? I mean, mm-hmm. because it's real. I mean, because if they're not working, the college scouts coming and they don't see the work ethic, they don't see the want to, mm-hmm. So how do we help? How do we infer that, the mindfulness of being, as you've been talking about, to help our young athletes that. Thank you.
So I've done a lot of work with student athletes in colleges and high school. So I was working with this particular college, actually it was BC. I worked with them for 12 years. My other roommate, Al Skinner, was the coach. And so I was helping them out. I only live maybe 3 miles from BC or whatever. And so I'd go in and I'd be hanging around those days when I could be with the team and hang out. And I talked to the fellow, said, "What's up, guy? How you doing?" He says, "I'm chilling." And excuse my language, but I said, chilling ain't going to get it done. You got to be chilling and willing. Because you say you want to be this, do something, and, because people tell me, well, I want to be like Mike, I want to be like Kobe. But then when I tell them what it takes, man, I didn't sign up for that. So they really don't want to do it. So it's helping them to create a vision for them so that they can see that it's doable. Okay, you want to do that, but here's the process you got to go through. So you have the goal, you have the target, but then you got to commit to the process. And it's a day-to-day chipping away and making progress. That's why I said success is a progressive realization of a worthy goal. is you got to make it in bite-sized chunks, and they have to put the work in and understand, because I'll tell you, I used to look at them cats and say, they wouldn't know how it worked if it came up and bit them in the butt. I'm just being real. And so the first thing I had to do is get them to accept and be honest about the fact that they're not working hard enough. So if you do what you're doing, you're going to get what you're getting. So if you want your season to be different than last year, you got to be different. You got to work differently. So we have to have those conversations. But the challenge is, just saying, if the parents ain't in on it, or you got to deal with the parents, the AU coaches, or other people, they have to be able to understand what it takes and commit to that. And we have to have many conversations, because if we want it more than they do, that doesn't work, and that's burnout. You all feel me when I say that? It's like just being real and saying, if you want to play at this level, then here's the process when you have to be engaged in. That's why we do what we do. Our job is to get them to the place where they accept personal responsibility and be honest about whether or not they're going to commit to doing it, that they have the security, the commitment, and the motivation to want to do it. So that's where I feel like we can have an impact. And we're working on how to create a mindful athlete program for those cats, for those people at that age, so that they have the self-regulatory skills that they need so that they can actually take coaching. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense, Stefan?
Yeah, it does. Now, what are some of those conversations you were talking about you have with the athletes, with the student athlete, of that process, accepting the process, wanting to do what it takes? Because they think they're there, but they're not.
But see, that's where the being comes in, because if you're being who you've been being, then you're going to get what you're doing. So you got to change your being. You got to change your attitude. You got to change how you see yourself. You have to change how, what your ideas about what work is. You got to change your concept. Because I had, on the pro level, I had one guy, and I told him, effort creates energy. He says, what do you mean? I said, you don't have a limited amount of energy. If you have to, the more effort you put in, the more energy you're going to have. So you got to change those beliefs about things, especially the beliefs about how they see themselves. Because one reason why they're giving you what they're giving you is because that's how they see themselves.
Yeah. Thank you for that. George, let's try and get through these last couple of questions quickly, just so that everyone can kind of have their say. So this is from Daryl. I don't think we answered this one. Is mindfulness different for an athlete in competition versus when they are done competing? What are some of those adjustments that you need to make?
Well, mindfulness is just mirror mind. So mindfulness tells you what's there, and then the insight or the understanding or the information, whatever, will help you with it. But it doesn't change, because at the end of the day, the intention is to be present, to be able to see and know what's going on, so that you can make adjustments and you can create space. So there's no difference. But I say it might be more challenging when you're not competing, because you don't have the structure of a beginning, middle, or end of a game or something like that. Life just keeps going on. We're kind of like on a marathon, but you still have to train. So it's the same. It's about the quality of mindfulness you have that can take you everywhere. That's why I say you got to be a mindful person to be a mindful athlete, mindful parent, or whatever. So it's the being mindful, being present, understanding how to not get distracted and stay on task. It's important. So that skill set is transferable.
Thank you. So here's a question from Lord, and Lord also has his hand up, but I'll read the question. He says, I find that I've been motivated by the most part by a fear of failure, a fear of losing, a fear of letting people down. You know, he thinks this has provided an edge to do extra and motivated him through the dog days. Then he says, unfortunately, I did realize along the way using this constant fear as motivation has led to a bit of an anxiety about failure. Can you add anything to that?
Yeah, well, you can be motivated by, that's when you're in survival mode and you're in fear. So obviously everything you see is going to be fear-based. If you can get out of survival mode and the growth mode, then you realize the joy of discovery and focusing on what you want and embracing the many victories. And the research says this, we think that we have to have success, then we're happy. The research says we're happy first, then the success comes. So I would focus on being happy and doing the things that make you happy, like thinking about things. A simple thing like if you go to the doctor's office and you give them chocolate and they put it away and they're looking forward to the chocolate, that will enhance their diagnosis, that they'll be in a positive frame of mind, they'll do better at their job. So think about it. So we got something to look forward to, or we focus on what's right. So there's all these things you could do, like 3 smiles a day, focus on past successes, think about having an attitude of gratitude. All of these things will help. And then you'll see that your motivation will be more focused on being a co-creator or creating things rather than being dominated or being afraid of doing something, because that affects your nervous system. Just think of all the pressure you put on your immune system and then your brain, because your brain, if it's stress there, you don't have access to stuff. So you're not going to be on your toes when it comes to your cognitive abilities. So it's always better if you can find a positive motivation, focus on how it's going to be and how excited it's going to be able to achieve your goal.
Yeah, thanks. We've had such a great call and so many guys on. I don't want to shortchange this last question. So the tenets of mindfulness say to accept and let go. So when dealing with chronic pain, how does it help to focus on the pain when human nature leads us to try and do anything but focus on the pain?
Well, I came to the mindfulness because of chronic pain.
Mm-hmm.
Chronic migraine headaches and everything. So the problem isn't the awareness of the pain. The problem is the awareness and the aversion to it, rather than, because we really haven't accepted it and say, yes, it's here. And I just have to say yes to it. I call it the 4 A's: awareness, acceptance, accepting it. And that's the challenging part. When you accept it, then the compassionate action is just let it go, because when you change your relationship to the pain, it's different. Because a lot of the time we're relating to the current pain based on our experience of pain in the past and not being in the moment. And it can develop into chronic pain. But I did this experiment where I went in, I had to get some dental work done. And as soon as he turned the drill on to give me a filling, I was in pain. But there was really no pain. That was the memory. And then once I realized it was just pressure, but I could see the reactivity. So it's about learning how to unlearn and not react, but to open up and say, yeah, it's just a little pressure. Even if it's pain, it's just a little bit, but we got to differentiate. This is what trauma is about. Getting triggered and then living in the past as if it's the present. So it's understanding the mindfulness of understanding that, yeah, it's a little pressure and it arises, it fades away. It doesn't stay the same. And so I had pain patients beside myself, and I'd have them think about pleasant events during the day, times during the day when the pain it wasn't a 10, it was like maybe a 3 or 4. You start to see that it goes up and down, but it's not the pain, it's my relationship to it. That's either going to create more tension, which means I have more intensity in pain, or more ease about just letting it be, and then maybe directing my attention to something else and just saying, yeah, it's there, but it's manageable, and I'm not going to make it a problem.
Yeah. Well, George, thank you so much. You've been more than generous with your time, and just so appreciate what you've been able to lend to this community of players, asking questions about mindfulness. And I'll say, let's give Leslie Isler a round of applause for choosing this book. What a great book, and everyone's kind of hung in there. And, we've had a really nice time today. So for you Grubhub winners, stand by for your email. Leslie will send that over to you. And for George and his team, again, thank you so much. And that concludes this edition of Pep Talk with the Literature League. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for having me.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, George. Have a good one.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. God, love and blessing to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it, man.
George.
Yeah.